Well, it seems like the El Nino actually got us this year, and despite the fact that it's March and we'd probably be ice fishing for like another month as of right now, the ice is off the lakes, at least in my neck of the woods, and folks have busted out their boats. So I guess we can say spring is here. So we're gonna start talking about some open water stuff. And one thing that was a really big thing last year was Northland released these eye candy baits, and they didn't have like a full giant batch. They couldn't get them in all of the stores, but they had them on the website and in a few retailers, and a bunch of people got their hands on this, and this is gonna be a really popular bait again this year. So in this video, I'm gonna run through, I believe I have 16 different ways that I have rigged eye candy so far. And so this is just kind of a segment that's kind of gonna get the juices pumping in your brain and give you some interesting ideas of how you can utilize these baits this open water season. So without further ado, let's jump right in. All right, so the first one is just utilizing the 4-inch minnow and just putting it on a simple jig head. In this case, I have a 1/4 ounce deep V jig, and this has been basically my #1 pairing with the eye candy, the one that I've used the absolute most, and it's just a good simple presentation. You can cast it out to cover, you know, weed edges, stuff like that, up on the rocks. You can cast it directly at marks on forward-facing sonar, stuff like that. And this is just a nice simple presentation that's basically been my #1 utilized presentation with eye candy so far. All right, next up we have the 4-inch minnow again, and it is once again on a deep V, but this is the spin variation. The spin jigs are really cool because it adds a little bit of flash, a little bit of vibration, in this case, a little extra glow. So some of these blades actually have paint that glows on them. So this is kind of a cool presentation, very similar to the last one, but you add that underspin and it gives it a whole different look, different feel, different drop speed, and we caught a bunch of fish on this jig this last year, but this is a really good 1-2 punch for just another look. All right, sticking to the underspin concept, this one right here is the Smeltinator jig, which some of you have probably heard of. Bassmaster Classic winning bait, but it has an underspin on it right here. So this is a different variation of this jig. And what's cool about this setup is you have the flash, you have the thump, and you have a really good upgraded Gamakatsu hook, and you just simply thread it on. What I love about this particular plastic is it's got a really cool color scheme. It's got some translucent going on, and it has some of the blue speckles, and that actually pairs really nicely with this particular jig that actually also has some of the blue speckles on the head. So pretty cool setup. That's another good one. All right, another way to use eye candy is I like to take this 4-inch minnow and I like to put it on some sort of hair jig, whether it's like more of like normal hair or you have Flashabou material like they have on this flash tail. And what that does is it creates a bunch of bulk, and it also creates a really slow drop speed. So when I'm fishing in really shallow water, I'll take a setup that's something like this, and I'll pitch it out there, and that thing's gonna fall really slowly, and sometimes that can just be the ticket when you're chasing walleyes. This flash tail is cool because it has a little bit more flash, I guess, and I like it especially in river fishing situations, but also in clear water where you know the fish are gonna want something a little bit flashier. So that's a really cool setup, and something you should try out this spring. Another thing that you definitely need to try out this spring is just the classic jig and paddle tail. So this is another good way to rig up eye candy. So right here I have the MVP jig. This is a 1/4 ounce, and I have it paired up with the paddle shad. And this is just a really good 1-2 punch, especially if you're gonna be fishing in the rivers. I do like the shape of this hook. It tends to be a little bit more snag free when you're fishing around cover and stuff like that. But all in all, I love this paddle shad in dirty water because of course it's a paddle bait, but also in clear water just because it's a little bit more of a finesse paddle bait in my personal opinion. And just the way it works is really visually appealing for walleyes. So this is a great 1-2 punch, and if you do happen to hook into a really big fish, this hook is nice and stout. All right, now we're gonna take a break from some of the traditional rigging setups, and I'm gonna break out a couple interesting, unique things, specifically in like the really finesse strategy vein of things. And this first one is one of my favorites. and this is a little Nedster jig, which is basically made for Ned rigging. It's got an awesome little hook, but then what I like to do is I like to clip off just a teeny bit of the front of the head of the eye candy grub and then thread it on there nice and straight. And this right here is such a cool little finesse bait. It's gonna fall plenty fast, you know, if you're gonna fish it in moderate depths, but it has a really small profile, and that grub plastic on the back just won't stop moving. You know, these grubs are not like the big floppy thumpy grubs. They're definitely more of like a finesse grub that won't stop moving. So this is a really cool presentation, especially if you're gonna be fishing in shallow water and you need something smaller to entice the fish into biting. All right, sticking to the ultra finesse theme, this right here is kind of a cool one. So this is the 3-inch eye candy minnow, and I actually have it paired with a 1/16 ounce tungsten. So it's gonna be really, really hard if you're looking for 16th ounce jigs out on the market to find something that's actually viable for walleye fishing. That's gonna be difficult, but this one right here is a really good option for walleyes. Plenty big, plenty tough. So you take that 16th and you pair it with the 3-inch plastic, and you have a super ultra finessey little rig for casting, you know, generally to shallow fish, but if you are using forward facing sonar, you can have the confidence in making that cast, letting it fall to the bottom. So this is just a super finessey little presentation. If you want to get as small as possible and entice bites, this is going to be it for chasing walleyes when you're pitching jigs in really shallow water. All right, so these next few, I got to give a shout out to Tom Wynn, because these baits are going to be right up his alley, these different rigging options. So the first one is a little tungsten jig. So this is an 1/8 ounce in black, which is Tom's favorite color, and pairing that up with a black eye candy grub. So this is one of Tom's go-to setups. I've been in the boat. He for sure has this tied on all the time, and it's just a really cool finessey presentation. He likes to pitch it at fish, let it get to the bottom, and then when it hits the bottom, he'll just let it sit there. Sometimes he'll move it a little bit, and this tail is just constantly moving. This is like the most finessey tail that's always moving. You don't have to do much with the bait because that tail does all the work. So that's one really good option. I got some more down here. We also have that same grub rigged up on a little drop shot hook. So if you just take that and nose hook it, and then put it on a drop shot rig. So basically you have the line coming down, you have a Palomar knot holding this up, and then you have a little dropper line down to a weight, whether that's lead or tungsten. So that's just another way you can run eye candy, and it's a really good option if you want to get that bait off the bottom a little bit. That's what makes drop shots so great. Another thing that makes them really great is just the fact that they have a really high hooking and landing percentage, because there's nothing for that fish to throw while it's fighting. So I'm a big fan of this as well. There's another drop shot option that I know Tom uses. Tom's a big fan of black, so I put all these on black. But that is just the 3-inch eye candy minnow, and just simply taking it and threading it through the nose. These baits are super, super durable. So you would think if you took a plastic and thread through the nose, you'd be going through them like crazy. But with how stretchy and durable these baits are, you can catch a lot of fish just nose hooking it like that. So that's another option. I feel like, I hope I'm not giving up any of Tom's secrets, but this is another option I've seen him use a lot when I've been in the boat with him. Another drop shot rigging option with this eye candy is just to take a different style hook. So the first two options I showed you were with octopus style hooks, and this one right here is with a straight shank hook. So I like to thread it on here and actually have the vast majority of the plastic, or a good chunk of the plastic, is threaded onto the hook. So this is the eye candy jig crawler, which is definitely one of my favorite little plastics. It's really finessey, it's got a really cool feel. The tail is really neat as well. And then on the back side here, if you take a scissor, you can split that if you want to fork the tail. So lots of options with this bait, but this is another really good drop shot in presentation. Okay, sticking to that jig crawler, another thing I love to do with it, you could put it on a lot of different jigs, but I love putting it on the Nedster. And the reason why is just because I feel like it makes a really cool compact profile, and then when that Nedster hits the bottom, it really promotes a vertical presentation. What's cool about these eye candy plastics is the fact that they do float. So pretty much all of these baits with different jigs, you're gonna have the bait sticking up in the air. But the Nedster is just, it's kind of like adds the bonus just based on the shape of the head. It kind of promotes that vertical presentation. So you take that and you have the little eye candy sticking up there, and it's just a really, really good 1-2 punch. All right, sticking to the theme of having the baits kind of stand up vertically, another really cool option is you take that Nedster jig and you put the big crawler on the back of it. So this is a bigger bait, and this is a presentation that Brad Hawthorne has caught a lot of fish on. So essentially what happens is you cast the bait out and it goes down to the bottom, and that tail sticks almost straight up, but because it's so long and so thin and just the way the plastic is made, there's gonna be a bunch of movement as that tail goes across the bottom. So this is a really, really cool presentation that I know Brad has caught a lot of smallmouth on, Brad's caught a lot of walleyes on, and yeah, I think you should give it a try too. But we got another crawler rigging option that I'm gonna show you next. All right, so the other cool rigging option that I like to do with these eye candy night crawlers is I like to put them behind some sort of spinner rig. This happens to be the butterfly blade, but we caught a bunch of fish fishing with Jared Houston on the St. Louis River, pulling blades. We caught a bunch on real night crawlers, but then this eye candy night crawler option was just as good, if not better, on that particular day. It also seemed like, for whatever reason, we're catching some of the larger fish on plastics, and that's always seemed to be a theme as far as I've seen, where when you're wanting to target larger fish, it seems like for whatever reason plastic seems to help make that happen. So it's another thing too, like with drop shots, I've drop shot night crawlers and leeches, and it seems like you get more big bites when you do when you put a plastic on there. So this is kind of a really cool setup. This is on the Super Death hook, which is really cool. It makes the plastic kind of rotate. And another option, if you're wanting to rig on like this, is just that simple 2-hook harness system. So yeah, really cool presentation. And one of the nicest things about this is just the fact that you can catch 20, 30, 40, whatever walleyes on one bait. All right, so here's one that I'm really excited to play with more, and this is the Smeltinator jig, Bassmaster Classic winning jig, paired up with a 4-inch eye candy minnow. So this is just gonna be a really cool natural presentation, and it's just gonna be perfect whether you want a snap jig, weed lines, rocks, stuff like that, or big sand flats, whatever, wherever the fish are, or cast at specific fish with forward-facing sonar, or jig it off the side of the boat and do the moping presentation, which is what Jeff Gustafson, Gussie, used to win the Bassmaster Classic 1 year ago. So this is gonna be a bait that I'm gonna be using a lot, and the reason for it is just because it's got a really cool overall presentation. They have some great colors, but also these hooks are just absolutely nuts. They're really good hooks. So this is gonna be a go-to jig and plastic presentation for me. I'm gonna be using this a lot this year. All right, last up I have a really cool presentation. I did a little bit of modifying to the plastic to make it work perfectly, but right here I have Northland's new Tungsten Crappie King jig, and I have it in white, as you can see, and I caught a bunch of fish on this when I was fishing with Donnie O'Bird up on Rainy Lake, chasing crappies in open water. And basically what I did is I took the eye candy grub and I actually used a scissor, and it took me a little bit, but I basically made it so the whole body section of this bait is a lot smaller, it's a lot more crappie sized, and this tail is just absolutely perfect for that scenario as well. Another thing that I like to do with eye candy a lot is I like to take a little dab of super glue and put it right on the back side of the head and push the bait on there, and basically in that scenario you have a bait that's, you know, you're not gonna be losing plastics left and right. And if you're catching a bunch of crappies with a bait like this, it doesn't matter if it's eye candy plastic or some other plastic, you're gonna have that bait sliding off or halfway off like crazy. You're constantly gonna have to adjust it. So putting a little super glue on there is gonna be a big deal. I feel like this is the perfect example of what you can do with these baits. You can get creative, you can modify them, and you can do different things. You can cut them. You can try different ways to get a really unique presentation. This is a perfect example of that, but just the fact that they have these unique capabilities in that, number one, they're really, really soft. Number two, they're very, very durable. Number three, they do a really good job of absorbing scent. And there's probably a few more things I'm not thinking about, but the fact that they're so soft makes things like these little grubs really, really effective. So play around with them, experiment. I just showed you, I believe it was 16 different ways to rig eye candy plastics, and there's got to be at least another 40 that, you know, you guys could come up with, or I probably have a few more that I forgot to share with you. So anyway, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, make sure to click that little red subscribe button down below, because we have a lot more awesome content coming in the future. And until then, we will see you in the next one.